The few, the proud, the lucky. Oh. Now, I don't know about all of you, but I've never been through anything like this in my life, where they start shutting everything down. But I'm not worried. It's going to work out one way or the other. There's been a lot of talk about, well, since we've all been kind of at home glued to our TV, a lot of talk about viruses and contagious things, and safe practices, wash your hands, you know, don't shake hands, 6 feet away, all that kind of stuff. So I thought I'd take advantage of our familiarity with all these terms that would be getting thrown at us and look at some analogies of how they apply to us. I believe there's a bright side to everything.
Yes.
You know, I believe there's in every tragedy, even a pandemic, there is opportunity as Christians to reach out to people, to help people, to connect with people, even with social distancing. You know, we have the opportunity to connect with people. We're live streaming. I hope we don't have any technical difficulties, but we're connecting to people and that are miles away. And so social distancing will not prevent us from doing what God wants us to do. And so here we are. We're going to, the title of the sermon today is A Contagious Gospel. You know, that's what it is. And I just want to share and highlight some things that I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks, and I hope it stirs people up to act. Hope it encourages you. I hope it relieves any fears or anxieties that you might have or that other people in your circle might have. So the first thing I want to look at is the underlying illness. And I hope you all have an outline. Number one, the underlying illness is because of sin. That's where we're going to start. Now, I just want to make it very clear that you don't get, you're not sick or you don't get the disease or something just because of sin. But there's an illness that's greater than a virus, and everybody's got it. You know, we talk about the rate of contagion and all this kind of thing. Well, we've all got this one. And so the sin then is something that we all already have. So since we all already have it, it is not necessarily contagious by our definition. Right. It's not spread around. We're rather born with it. And so Paul talks about this in Romans 5. And I'll let you know, those of you that are part of our Romans Bible study during the week, I got a couple of things in here from Romans. And I hope you notice them. In Romans 5 it says, "Therefore, just as sin has come into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men, because all sin, for sin indeed was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not counted where there is no law." Now, I don't know if you can tell this in your handout or online, but death spread. Now, we can say that that's contagious because all of us are going to die one of these days. And so, he came through one man, death. And since we're all subject to death, we're all sin. And so, we have this thing. Now we know what the disease is, so to speak. And again, using many analogies. And so, there is this spread came through. It's a generational thing. The next generation has it. It's in our DNA, so to speak. And so we've all sinned. And so we're going to be held accountable for that. And that's what Paul says there, that the world before the law was given, it was not counted where there is no law, but it is. It's going to be, because we have laws now. We understand this. And so it's really interesting to me that when we think about this underlying illness, there are many times when we maybe not know it. You see, a lot of people today, we're doing social distancing because we could feel totally good, have no symptoms of this illness at all, but be a carrier of the virus. That's the same thing as, some people are unaware that of the sin that they are in danger of. But there's tests that we can do. The law is kind of like a test. You've heard in the news about they want to test everybody. It's interesting because the test is going to come out positive or negative for this virus. So if you're positive, you got it. If you're negative, you don't. And so, the law came so that we could know that we have this thing called sin in our life. It was the test kit. There's no shortage of test kits in this regard. Everybody knows it. All have sinned. Because we know it because we all know that unless the Lord comes, we're all going to participate in death. The end of the illness, in this case, is death and sin. There's no escaping it. And so, like I just mentioned a minute ago, not everybody knows they have it. And so, if we look at number 2, we'll see this. And in your outline, it'll say the patient is in danger, but they do not know it. Now, there's a difference between the virus and sin, and this is this. Sin doesn't reveal itself to you on its own. The virus will. It'll make you sick. You'll be going to the doctor, they'll give you the test. And so, it's hard to convince somebody they're sick when they feel good. And so, there's this passage in Isaiah. The Lord is talking to Israel. He says, you felt secure in your wickedness. They would say, no one sees me. But your wisdom and your knowledge have led you astray. And you said, I am the only one and there is no other. So disaster will overtake you and you won't be able to charm it away. Calamity will fall upon you and you won't be able to buy your way out. A catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one for which you are not prepared. Now there was a couple of things in there that I wanted to kind of point out this morning. One is that Israel did not know that the wrath of God was being stretched out over. They were living well. They were building houses. They were going about their business. They were having fun. How could life be any better? But what they didn't realize is they wasn't thanking God for all that they had. They didn't realize that they wasn't recognizing that it was God that supplied everything that they had. They were confident in their wisdom. They were confident in their knowledge. And because of their confidence that they were well, they were deceiving themselves. Now, they would say, I'm the only one and there is no other. Well, that's a really powerful statement to the Israelites because one of their, back in Deuteronomy 6, one of their primary teachings is the Lord is one, there's one God, the Lord is one. And so for them to say that they are totally unaware of who God is. Now, when disaster strikes, you won't be able to buy your way out. And so what we're going to find out then is there's no escape. There's no escape from this disease of sin. This problem that we have, each one of us. There's no escaping that. But the world, the patient, the world, those who are lost, they don't know it. They're not aware of it. Now, we're in a time right now when people are starting to take stock of themselves. They're starting to think, hey, I gotta think about my well-being now. You know, I gotta wash my hands. I gotta be careful who I come into contact with. I'm looking at people this way and that way. That's what we want. We want people to consider their relationship with God. It's really hard. I'll tell you straight up. It is really hard in this country, even among these pandemic that we're experiencing right now, because we got it easy. We really do. You know, because if you get sick right now, you go to the doctors and they're going to do everything they can possibly do to make you well. They've taken an oath. Not everybody has that opportunity. Well, I want you to know that in the same way concerning the sin in the world, when you go to Christ, when you go to God, let them know that He is going to do, and He has done everything that needed to be done to take away that sin, to remove the condemnation of that sin. He's done that. And so, imagine today if you had trucks rolling across the country and they had a vaccine. Everybody knew that you get that vaccine, you are safe. No problem. Those trucks would be getting hijacked. There'd be people along the side of the road that would be blocking them. But everybody would want it. And if you think about it that way, that's the way the gospel is. In this case, in the gospel's case, it's the cure that's contagious, not the disease. We just don't think about it that way sometimes. So I wanted to take the opportunity of these times we're in to illustrate the point that the cure in this case is contagious, not the disease. So that's number 3. That's number 3. The cure is the contagious factor, not the illness. The cure is the contagious factor, not the illness. Now I'm going to go through these next few slides kind of slowly because I want to point this out. In Acts chapter 2, in the whole book of Acts, really, we have the Acts. We call it Acts. We always abbreviate all the titles, but it's the Acts of the Apostles. It's the Acts of the church. And so for us to understand how the church functioned, Acts is book. You got to go there. But let's see how contagious this thing is. So in Acts chapter 2, which by the way also has the record of the day of Pentecost when the Holy Spirit came. And it says there in verse 41, so those who received His word were baptized, and there were added that day about 3,000 souls. We were told to have 20 here today. Now imagine if one day Marina Church grew by 3,000 people. Pastor Mike would be having a heart attack. Probably fall over. Everybody else would be in a panic wondering what to do. But what a great thing that would be. We'd deal with it, I'll guarantee you that. We'd deal with it. And it says, so they were added that day about 3,000 souls. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And all came upon every soul. And many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as they had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Now, why were they numbers growing? Real simple. The apostles were going out and spreading the word. Right at the beginning, those who received His word. That's amazing to me. Before I go on, though, I want to address one thing. It talks here about all those in were a part of this group, they were selling everything they owed and put it all in one pot. We're not going to do that today. That was an amazing thing, though, if you could ever imagine that. I don't think there's very many people who would do that today. But, you know, God put that on their heart to do it. That's the thing. God put that upon their heart to do it. And if He put it upon our hearts to do it, we'd do something like that too. Well, there's one thing here that I really want to point out. And it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayers. They were devoted. Their selling of their goods demonstrated how devoted that they were to the gospel message, to what the apostles were teaching. That's how devoted they were. I look myself in the mirror and I'll tell you, I'm not quite that devoted. I don't know if I could just sell my house. And how do you do that? What level of devotion is that? Sell your car, sell your truck, sell your house, sell your furniture, give up all your food, empty your bank account, cash in your retirement, put it all in one big fund. That's devotion, first of all. But for us today, it's going to be different. And we're not looking at it that way for us, but each and every one of us will have to decide, it'll be between us individually and God, just how devoted are we to get this cure for sin out into the world, out into our community, even if it's just on our street. The second thing we look at is they were devoted, and I like this part, and I like that, and awe came upon every soul. They stood in awe at the power of the gospel. For those of you in the Romans study, you remember Romans 1:17. For the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. Well, this power was at work in those around them, and they were in awe of that power. And so, do we experience that awe? Devotion? Stand in awe at the wonderful things God's doing through His Word? That puts gladness in their hearts. Puts generosity in their hearts. Praising God and having favor with all the people. And what's it say? And the Lord added to their numbers, day by day, those who are being saved from this terrible illness of sin. Now, there were so many passages in Acts, I couldn't put them all on the slide. We need 3 or 4 more slides. But I put a few down here. Acts 4:4 says, but many of those who had heard the word believed, and the number of the men came to about 5,000. That's in Acts 4. And then another one in Acts 5, and more than ever, believers were added, multitudes of both men and women. And then in Acts 16, so the churches were strengthened in faith, and they increased in numbers daily. That's amazing to me. Now, I wonder if we had church every day, if we could ever see our numbers increase daily. And that's something to think about. But all these things, but in all this, we need to understand that the gospel is the contagious factor. That's what people, they want the cure. The gospel is the cure. And so we see this. So we know what the illness is. We know who the patients are. We know that the cure is contagious. Now what? Now what do we do? If you see, so number 4 in your outline. The disciple is the minister of the cure. Now we're still in Acts, a couple of passages in Acts. We look at Acts chapter 6:1. It says, now in these days when the disciples were increasing in number. Well, now we've made a little switch. The disciples are increasing in number. Now think about those numbers we had that were catching the cure, so to speak. 3,000 in one thing, 5,000 another time, multitude. They wasn't just being saved, but they were devoted to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship. And because of their devotion, they wasn't just saved, they themselves became disciples. They wanted to be disciples. They were listening to the apostles. Well, who were the apostles? The apostles. They were the 12 disciples. They wanted to be disciples, just like they were. They were following in someone's footsteps. The apostles were following in Jesus' footsteps. They said, follow us because we follow Christ. That's their message. And multitudes, thousands and thousands of people followed them. And they didn't just believe, but they believed, they devoted themselves, they became disciples. So we see a little bit further down in Acts 6:7, the word continued to increase. The word was being spread. It continued to increase. And the number of the disciples multiplied greatly. In Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests became obedient to the faith. So the word increased, it was being talked about. You had all these people going out there, they're just telling everybody they meet. They're going, back in those days, they went down to the market, they'd be hanging out in the public square, and that's where everybody gathered during the day. All the smart people, everybody, they would talk, they would debate. And these guys, the Christians would go down there and they'd talk about this new way and new relationship with God. And they would talk about it, and people would hear, they would be reiterating what they had learned from the apostles, and they're talking and they're interacting with the community. I tell you, there was no social distancing there. They were obedient to the faith. They were obedient to the faith. In Acts 14, it says again, and when they had preached the gospel to that city, which in that context is Derbe, and they had made many disciples, they returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch, strengthening the souls of the disciples, encouraging them to continue in the faith, and saying that through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of God. Here you have it again. They're preaching the gospel. They're making many disciples. They're out there sharing it. They're spreading the cure. They're strengthening the souls of each other. They're continuing this fellowship as we're doing today. They're encouraging each other to continue in the faith, just as they were taught. That's an amazing thing. And they say that through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of God. Well, I think for most people they say we're kind of in a turbulent time here. And then in Matthew 28, though, these are Jesus, and Jesus said, go therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Now, I don't know about you, but that means more to me today than it did a week ago. Because I started thinking about it in our current state of affairs here. But I want you to look at that. What's Jesus say? First thing he said, he didn't say in Matthew 28 to go preach the gospel, although that is in making disciples. But he focused on making disciples. Those that are devoted. Those that are devoted to fellowship with one another. Those that are devoted to teaching and understanding who God is and focus on that relationship. Those that are devoted to going out and preaching and teaching and following in Jesus' footsteps. Teach them to observe. He says in that second sentence, and teach them to observe all that I have taught you. Now, this is the English Standard Version. And I use that translation on purpose. Because most translations do an interpretation that says teaching them to obey all that I have said. That's a interpretation. But that word really means to guard what you've been taught. Guard it. Teaching them to guard and to do and to just make what He has commanded the absolute center and focus of our devotion. Obedience, devotion, encouragement, loving one another, talking, spreading the cure. And of course, we know that there's going to be a lot of tribulation along the way. And I will admit, it can be scary. It can be scary going and talking to somebody about your faith. No question about it. The men's breakfast a few weeks ago, a month ago or so, there's some things, Jesus Himself says, hey, this is the tough road to go down. But there's something right there. He says, and behold, I am with you always. He's walking with you. Yeah, it's a tough road. It can be scary. There's going to be tribulation come up, but He's right there with you. And so that's how we trust in Him. He's right there with you. So we can do all of these things. We know that the underlying illness is sin. We know that the patient is in danger and they may not know it. We know that the cure is contagious. And we know that the disciple is the minister of the cure. Now, what's the patient going to do when they hear the cure? God's done everything. He has put everything out there on the table. He didn't hold nothing back. And He's done this. He's done everything in advance so that everybody is going to get the chance to make a choice. Look at number 5. The patient has a choice between life or death. Now, I love the book of John. I know if you're in the Bible study, you hear me say that about every word. But it's true of John also. John, Jesus says, for if you believe Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. I love those kind of things because then it gives me a place to go back and look. So let's look at Deuteronomy 30 in our outline. Moses said, this day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life. And now choose life. Now this is real interesting. Me and Robin, it's been years ago now, I was doing a Gideon presentation down in Vallejo at this church. And the pastor there preached on this message. And I'll never forget it because he just really drove it home. He says, Moses, this is towards the end of Moses' book, and he laid all this out. He says, if you do this, things will be great. Choose life. If you do this, things will not be good at all. Don't choose that. But he still had to tell them what choice to make. Now, imagine if a guy came over here with a hammer and he says, well, I'm going to hit my finger with the hammer. Or he has the option not to. What's he going to do? Do you have to tell him not to hit his finger with the hammer? No, you don't really have to tell him that, right? It seems like a logical choice. You're going to choose life, choose death. Hey, I'm going to choose life. Oh, no. Well, they don't know. Because sin is deceiving. And that's why, back to number 2, that the patient's in danger, but they may not know it. They do not know it. So you got to tell them. Choose life. Choose life. So he says, this day I've called heaven and earth as witnesses against you that I've set before you life and death. Now choose life so that you and your children may live and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice. I like that. Listen to his voice. He's calling. Listen to his voice. Choose life. Choose life. Choose the cure. Jesus said in John 5, he says, truly, truly, I say to you, whoever hears my word and believes, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He does not come into judgment, but has passed from death to life. Choose life. Truly, truly, I say to you, an hour is coming and is now here when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself. You got to let them know to choose the cure. Choose life. Choose life. The life is in Jesus Christ. Those who choose life, he says, pass from death to life. Those who hear will live. How we see this, right? Romans 10. How will they hear without preaching? How will they hear without someone going to tell them? That's the disciples' job, to go and tell. To go let them know. Let them know to choose life. Choose the cure. Because once you got it, you're good. You've passed from death to life. The only cure for sin is Jesus Christ. He's the only cure for sin. So I see all these analogies these last few days, and everybody wants a cure for the coronavirus. Everybody's got fears. Everybody's preoccupied with what's going on. They're glued to the news, or they're wondering how they're going to pay their bills, or wondering if they're going to run out of food. They're wondering all these things. And I hope this isn't true. I hope this part ain't true. That it could get a lot rougher before it gets better. I hope that's not true. But if it is, then we, the church, the disciples of Jesus Christ, we have the message that's going to bring hope and life and get everybody through this thing.
Amen.
We have the message. We devote ourselves to teaching. We devote ourselves to the Word. We devote ourselves and reach out to our community and our neighbors and our friends. We devote ourselves to encouraging one another to persevere through tribulation. We hold the truth of the gospel tight. We guard all that we're commanded to do, because we do it. We don't want to get knocked off. That's what we do. That's what disciples do. We gather here. We don't get together every day. It'd be all right with me if we did. But we don't get to. Maybe twice a week, maybe 3 times a week at the most. But when we get those moments to be together, we got to do something. We got to share with each other who it is in our sphere of life, in our family circle, or in our circle of friends or co-workers. Who is it that you want to reach? We could pray for them. We could come up with a way to reach out to them, to get their attention, to share the message. We got to encourage each other and one another to continue to do that. That's what we got to do. We got to devote ourselves to getting the message out, especially to those that we know and that we live with. Especially. We can do it. And I know we can, because Jesus is going to be right there with us all along the way. Amen. Anybody got any questions this morning? questions?
I like what you just finished here with, is the fact that sometimes I think we're sleepwalking. I just like the idea that in the worst of times is when people's ears open up and they feel that they hear. Look for those opportunities.
That's right. It was just, in case people on the internet couldn't hear, he was just talking about how tough times is a way to get people's attention, basically. If we look back at the Old Testament, God was always using tough times to try to get Israel's attention.
Mm-hmm.
You see that over and over and over. Anybody else? What a great morning. Let me offer up a prayer, and then we'll sing some songs. Right? All right, Heavenly Father, we're so thankful. We're so thankful that you've given us the wisdom and the knowledge to be able to understand what you would have us to do. We're thankful that you have given us a cure for the sin in our life. And Lord, we ask you now to work on our hearts, and help us to understand more and love more, and get out into our communities more to spread the cure of the gospel. Lord, let it be something that we're just so devoted to give away and to share with others. And Lord, we know that you're with us always, even unto the end. And we're so thankful for your blessings on us, even allowing us to meet again today. And for all those who are not here but hearing, Lord, we pray you'd stir their hearts and bring them back. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
You were at the beginning.
Thank you for being part of our first live stream. We have learned a lot this morning. We have learned a lot of what not to do. We have learned a lot of things that we need to do. And we got it on them. Okay? So those of you who watched us on live stream, we will do better next week. We'll have better sound. We'll have better visuals because we have learned how to take all those little icons off the screen. So yeah, we learned that on YouTube while we were doing the service. But we can't do it until we get offline. So thank you for being with us. We love you. We look forward to being with you next week. God bless you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's go home. Let's go settings. Go to settings. No, this isn't quite what I thought it was.
Camera. Text me when you get home. Okay, that sounds good.
What's that?
Camera.
I know.
Big old VCR.
I know, huh? I know, you have to carry him on your shoulder. Yeah?
Yeah, the camera guy can pull behind here, puffing and puffing.
Like what? Oh, yeah, we'll figure it. Yeah, it could. We'll get it. We'll be better next week. Let's do main functions. Other settings. Okay, let's do other settings. Oh yeah, this is it. Framing assistant, framing areas. Oh, okay, we gotta go to the middle one. Output on screen display. Turn this to off. 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 And now we go back. It's supposed to be off. What's up with that?
Just in case.
I thought. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to. Oh man, we're still live. We're still live.